It's a choice to live aroused. Arousal makes everything better. And arousal itself, a desire, like arousal is creation energy. It's manifestation energy. And your desire is kind of like your roadmap on where you get to go and where you want to take it.
Welcome to Come Talk with Amy, the podcast where sex isn't whispered about, it's talked about out loud. I'm Amy, your host and intimacy coach, here to spark raw, playful, and unfiltered conversations about relationships, desire, and everything in between. No shame, no scripts, just real talk about what really turns us on. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, welcome back to Come Talk with Amy. Yes, I have a question. What if desire that scares you the most is the portal to your freedom? What about that? Today we have Sharon Marie Scott, author of Forbidden Alchemy, here to talk shame, sovereignty, kink. We know we love a kink conversation, and that delicious, dangerous edge where we finally meet ourselves. Yes, we're so excited to have this conversation. Welcome, Sharon Marie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and so ready to finally crack open these conversations that, we should be having more in public, questions about the taboo and our desires and pleasure.
Yes, your recent book launch for Forbidden Alchemy, the pub date was November 11th, right?
Yeah, which was, a great numbers day, 11/11. It has a lot of magic around that. It was a perfect date for its release.
Yes, 11/11. We love those magical numbers. So for our listeners who may be new to you, how do you describe the work that you do with the world of Forbidden Alchemy? And what does Forbidden Alchemy mean to you?
Well, I describe myself as an erotic mystic and a spiritual innovator. And so for me, erotic mystic means that the way that I commune with like the divine or my spirituality is through the body and through sensation, as opposed to like monks. That's a different kind of mystic where their path to God, let's say, is through ignoring of the body and the transcending of the body and staying into the spirit. I don't know if I'm already going like a little too crazy in the spiritual speak, but yeah, erotic mystic. So I experience the divine, which includes orgasm and climax, through body and sensation. And so erotic mystic, and then spiritual innovator, because I am taking, I'm bringing back these like sacred erotic mysteries that it's coming out more and more in the public forums about Mary Magdalene and how she wasn't a prostitute and how even what we think of as like brothels were actually temples where we met, the masculine and the feminine united in sacred union and created things, not just babies, but, manifested things and created magic and spoke to the divine. And so I'm here to contemporize the sacred erotic mysteries for today's people. And so people can make their way back to their own bodies and back to their own divinity. And so Forbidden Alchemy is kind of like the next evolution of shadow work. I don't know how much you guys talk about stuff like that in kink, but yeah, so this is the next evolution of that. So instead of like being on this like hamster wheel of shadow work, because it really never ends if you think of it in the context of that, like we're always focused on the obstacles. We never quite feel complete or whole or divine, but instead, going through the taboo is this like beautiful pleasure-driven way to reintegrate these separate pieces of ourselves. And so like the taboo is, people have asked me like, what is the taboo or what is kink? I'm sure you've had that question on here before. And my answer to that is anything that we're going to feel like someone else is going to judge us for. So it's not like a standard definition, but it's subjective by what we find shame-filled or what we think people will judge us for.
It's that shame like base, right?
It is for me, or that's my lived experience of it. And that's mostly where I speak from it. And it seems to be a common truth for people.
Absolutely. And I love that you do body-based work. I mean, I'm a somatic intimacy coach myself. And so like there is so much power within our bodies. Our bodies have been with us from the first time we took a breath and they'll be with us until the last, right? And so there's so much that knowledge and wisdom that captures, and there's so much healing within our own bodies and tuning into that. Also, say that I feel like maybe the most spiritual moments, at least for me, are in that orgasmic state.
Yes.
So, yeah,
It's a and it's a frequency, really. It's a vibration. And
I love
this is
that.
another thing that I teach. If your listeners don't know yet what sex magic is or aren't practicing sex magic, they need to look me up. Because if what we're talking about, people want to say unconditional love is like the highest form of experience, or like, it's the highest vibrational embodiment, and it's not. There's actually a person, David R. Hawkins, who has done a measurement of emotions, and unconditional love and love sits at the middle of the chart. And above that, guess what? Joy, bliss, ecstasy, enlightenment, those are above love. If you just want to like manifest better in your life, you can pursue your own pleasure and raise your root frequency so that you're like in some sort of pleasure every day, and you're going to be manifesting more precisely and more quickly to you. So pleasure, this is a big drive of Forbidden Alchemy too, which is pleasure is a technology.
Yes, I know you brought up sex magic, and Laura Berman, she recently released a book called Sex Magic. I went to an event with her talking about that, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like,
Yes.
this is amazing. And the manifestation. Ah, I'm excited for you to take our listeners further on that journey. So, what was the point where you were like, this book needs to be written? Like, it needs to get out there to the masses?
I love this question. And it's not the first book I wrote. So I also have a background in having written comic books and video games for many years. It was super fun to work in. I also worked in film and fiction as well, but comic books and video games were the really sexy industry to be working in. Had so much fun. But Forbidden Alchemy was the second book I wrote this year. So the first one is actually coming out in February. The first one I wrote, called Flesh and Flame, which is a broader book about pleasure as the portal to self-mastery or spiritual mastery. And in the writing of Flesh and Flame, I included really racy personal stories similar to what Forbidden Alchemy has in it. But they told a story of a broader journey. It was more like a hero's journey in that book, but it included some of my kinky proclivities. And so in the writing of Flesh and Flame, I just realized how cathartic, and it really enlivened me personally from the inside out to share those stories and really feel expressed. And so that's when I was like, oh, I need to write the book that has never existed for me. I need to write the book that shares with the world how healing the kink journey can be. I feel like it's really what it's for. If anyone has been on a healing journey, whether that's a spiritual one or a more secular one, that it is in the holding space for the things that are at your edge, and you hold it long enough that something happens in that moment. There's a moment where you meet the frequency. That frequency finally collapses, and you heal, or you expand, and you feel better, and you feel lighter. And so the Taboo is just such an exquisite vehicle to be on the healing journey for, because it's so sexy to be leaning into those things that society is telling you you shouldn't want. To want that anyway is a really sexy and brave and courageous pursuit. And so for me, it's just such a natural modality for one's healing and spiritual expansion journey.
Yes, so fucking fabulous. And also, like, to live in the erotic and the ethos, like, unlocks so much expansion and yumminess. Like, yes. And it is like a forever journey, right? Like, once you start living in that, and I love how you're talking about you can live in that pleasure day by day, right? By little different things as well as big expansive things. Sky's the fucking limit. We love it.
In fact, there's a little nuance to the way people will talk about shadow work and like it never ends. And they're not wrong. Shadow work never ends. That's one way to look at the same journey. Or you can say there's always more pleasure to step into. There's always more pleasure, frequency to be vibrating in. And so they're both true, right? But they're two different lenses that you're looking at your own journey through.
Yeah.
One is more victim mentality, and one is more sovereign.
Okay, let's go a little bit deeper into that. So you talk about living a turned on life rooted in sovereignty. And what does that really mean for us everyday folks?
Yes. Sovereignty to me means I am fully self-governing. My feelings, my reactions to life around me, I believe that I am 100% accountable for what happens in my life and my emotional reaction to life as it happens around me. So to be turned on, to live a life turned on, my platform is life turned on, is a choice to be in sovereignty, if I respond to something in a reactive way, then I know that there's yet another frequency that I have to hold space for that needs collapsing in me, because my body, my cellular memory is still holding on to it. It's like the body keeps the score, but one step further into the energy healing modality. So I just really believe it's a choice to live grumpy. It's a choice to live aroused. And it's not as if I don't have moments in time that pull me, let's say, out of coherence with that turned on arousal. Arousal makes everything better. And arousal itself, a desire, like arousal is creation energy. It's manifestation energy. And your desire is kind of like your roadmap on where you get to go and where you want to take it. But arousal energy, like again, going back to sex magic, like you can, an easy example is when I was a writer for comic books and video games, and occasionally I would hit like a creative block, right? A writer's block. I would use self-pleasure to raise my creation energy, to like literally just raise my vibration. And then I wouldn't finish, because if you finish, it collapses. So you raise your vibration and then you let it ride and you go back to the creative endeavor that you're working on. And I promise you, you'll have whatever it is that you are blocked on, you'll break through.
Edge is a creative tool. You heard it here first. Love it. Love it. And yeah, I mean, I also love that word choice, because it's so key. For my like erotic journey, I lived a lot of time in that shame, right? And what I've noticed with clients of mine, anyone that I have really a conversation about sex, is there's so much shame around sex, right? A lot of the times we're living in and dictated by the shame that we have around sex. And so to get free of that and to really break it down and understand it, and understand that you do have, voice and choice in it, is so huge. And I would say a lot of my listeners were raised to be polite, pleasing, small, right?
Me too.
So many people resonate with that. And I would love to hear like your perspective for our listeners listening in who also resonate with that. What do you want them to know about embracing the desires that they've suppressed?
Yes, there's so many ways I can approach this topic. I believe pleasure is a technology. I think that people would agree that in general, there's like sort of a life purpose that they're searching for. And, what is it? How are they uniquely qualified to pursue that life goal or that dharma? And I believe pleasure is how you figure it out. So having worked in video games, I use the video game analogy because it feels true. So I believe that we are in a video game, but we're not just the main character. We're also the game designer. Once we have the unlock and we figure out, oh, we're also the designer, that's the sovereignty piece, right? Totally self-governing. Then it's about playing in each level of the game and like learning the console. What are the power-ups? Where are the traps? Leveling up, literally, like in the collapsing of those frequencies that we talked about with healing and then expanding. That's literally a leveling up, because you are now vibrating at a higher root frequency than you were before. So shame, I feel like this is like a brand new thought actually coming up from this conversation. I'm thinking what's feeling true as I'm thinking it is that shame also points us toward our dharma, because it's like those are the two opposites. The shame is probably pointing you to exactly the central core healing that you're supposed to recognize, that is like your hero's journey. If you were writing a movie about you, I wrote screenplays too, so right? If you're the main character of your movie, that character usually has a ghost in their background. So something that was really pivotal in their life that caused them to close down in some way and created trauma or fear or collapse or something. And shame is often a part of that story. And so I'm seeing the link now in our conversation between pleasure being a technology and shame being a really loud marker for what will probably be your dharma, because as you move through the things that you carry the deepest shame around are the things that you have to teach and the wisdom you have to share with the world.
As you were talking, I was also putting those pieces together, and it's like, it's so true. Like our deepest shame, the thing that's holding us back, it's that fear-based, also probably the things that we desire the most in a lot of ways.
I think the shame is the indicator of that.
Yes.
And of course, we're not just talking about kink and sexy stuff in the bigger parts of life where we have shame around not feeling enough. And so what we desperately desire is to feel enough and to feel divine, in fact, and to celebrate ourselves.
I'm wondering also, what other desires do you see that people often shame themselves for that's actually pretty incredibly common?
Yeah, it's just about, for me, like the one that comes out really loud and clear is just wanting more touch, more intimacy, more sexual partners, more pleasure, more money, more success, more recognition, right? I think wanting more is probably my biggest, deepest answer because it's also true for myself.
I love that.
We've been told not
Yourself.
to. We've been told that
Mm-hmm.
wanting more is selfish,
Exactly.
and I call it self
Mm-hmm.
yes. Not selfish, but self yes. Wanting more.
I love that. Self yes. Oh my God. I'm going to be adapting that. Like, it's so true. I mean, be audacious with your life and see how it unfolds.
And again, your desire is a map. And your
Mm-hmm.
pleasure is the compass, the
Absolutely.
desire is the map. Follow your desires and keep
Yep.
following. Keep getting underneath your desires too. Like, I want to be in submission. I get it. Now why? There's a feeling state. There's an internal, like, emotional feeling state that you're reaching for by being in submission. What's that about? And then if you find that, there might be a place to go underneath and underneath and underneath. And like, this is what I think my communities that I sort of grew up in were missing, with these conversations of the whys. And not so much because we're trying to label ourselves as broken or find even the origin, because we're carrying desires that are not only ours. We're carrying genetic inheritance and past life inheritance that also are playing out at the same time. So it's a really complex web, of stuff that we're carrying.
Absolutely. And I would love if we could go a little personal, if you're okay with that. So, was there anything in the book that you were scared to include? Like, and how did you move through that fear yourself of being seen, putting it out there?
I can't remember which chapter number it is, but I remember that how much I was including this journey. There's a piece of the journey in Flesh and Flame, which is coming out in February, but most of it is in Forbidden Alchemy. And in fact, it's an entire storyline really that happens from the start to the finish of the book. And it has to do with my childhood wounds of sexual abuse and incest. So when I was 5 and 6, I was touched inappropriately by two different people, a babysitter's husband and then my brother. In those experiences, they were, of course, violations because I had no way to consent to what was happening to me. To speak about those interactions as violent or abusive is a different conversation. My 5 and 6-year-old body did exactly what it was supposed to do. It felt pleasure. And so I became confused. I had these crossed wires at 5 and 6 where my body was experiencing this amazing euphoria from the pleasure of these interactions. But I was being conditioned to keep it a secret. And the way they did that was through shame and fear, that if somebody found out, that I would somehow be disconnected from love. So I learned that ecstasy was something to be afraid of, that it was a threat. And so at 5 and 6, with no one, of course, to even who really knew what was happening, and then having no guidance after I became a sexually available adult, my life just became sort of muted because I translated that as anything in my life that got me close to joy, bliss, was a threat, and it made me feel unsafe. And so I systematically and unconsciously sabotaged every level of my life because, again, like, more was too much. Ecstasy, I wasn't deserving somehow, and so I sabotaged it. So the parts in the books that are the most controversial is the healing journey that I went on with my 5 and 6-year-old. And it was a simple thing that happened a couple of years ago that started it, which was I was self-pleasuring. I have done plenty of work on those little girls, those aspects of me, and to tell them that they're loved and it wasn't their fault and their pleasure's okay. But in this moment, I had an aspect of me come in and want to be a part of my self-pleasuring. She wanted to be an active participant and receiver of self-pleasure. And sometimes you think, is that just a fleeting thought? But somehow I could tell that it was separate of me. And so I welcomed her into my self-pleasuring routine that night, and a healing took place. And I thought, that's the healing that I was looking for. That's what I thought. I want to say, like, a month later, I was with a lover, and it's a relationship that still goes on now. And it's a really incredible sexual chemistry and kind of like the deepest I'd ever experienced up to this time. And I remember I was riding him really deeply, which was already really exposing to me again, right? So letting people see me and that amount of pleasure and really like taking my pleasure was a big challenge for me. But with him, it was so safe. And so I was riding him really deep already, and I could tell he can feel the tiniest little movements and contractions from me, which just feeds it that it's okay and safe to be in my pleasure. And she came in again and she was like, I want to take the pleasure with him. I want to take it. And so I let her come in then. And I thought that was the end of the healing. But it comes up, I can't remember exactly how many times, but with yet a different lover who actually I have an actual daddy baby girl dynamic with. And she came in more than once in a series of dates that we had kind of pretty close together, which was unusual for us. And I went through another series of healings where not only did she come in and take her pleasure, but she was seen and celebrated in her innocence of that pleasure. I had other aspects that, again, the book talks about it, but I had other aspects come into, like my goddess aspect and my vixen aspect, my primal, and they all kind of like integrated in these amazing moments. I wanted to say scenes, and I suppose they kind of were scenes, but in the context of an actual daddy baby girl relationship. So the controversial part that felt so scary is for me to say it's okay that my 5 and 6 year old had pleasure from those experiences, and that well-meaning people, after they found out about the abuse, would say, that's so terrible what happened to you. I'm so sorry that happened to you, which just reinforced the shame she had already developed. I can't tell you how many people I've had private message me after I start to talk about these things who all admit that they have experiences from their childhood like this, and they've never been able to share that they were allowed to say, I liked that.
It's so powerful. And whew, I was like, let's go personal. And you took us there. And thank you so much for sharing that. I also am a survival of childhood sexual assaults. I have that on my website. And I think it's something that we do not talk about enough. And it's something that is extremely common. This could be a whole other multiple podcasts about that. Just the healing that you have described is so beautiful, and being able to hold her, and that it's not just a one-time healing, right? That it's been like these multiple experiences. And
yeah.
I just think that that's like, yeah, it's so beautiful. And also like the keyword safety, right? Being able to feel safe. Because I would say in that context, allowing to feel the pleasure, but that safety piece, right? That's a whole other...
I feel your little girl here with us. That's why you're stumbling on your words. So I just want to recognize her, that she is safe. I can riff on the safety part because it is about, of course, picking the right partners to play with, of course. However, it's more about creating a safety that comes from within. And yes, we use the safety of the container from our partners too. I would argue that you are on the journey of creating that safety from inside instead of reaching for outside for that safety, because otherwise you're always going to be chasing safety. And if you never develop it from within, you're just not complete. That's a quantum leap kind of healing.
Yes. The internal work is the most powerful. You take that sovereignty. For me, we're talking about kink, that has been, and just sex in general, like has been so healing and most of it is like that internal, am I okay with myself? Like we talk about consent.
What does she need?
What does she need? What does she want? What does she desire? And being able to give that to myself and honor that is so huge, when before it was more of that people pleasing, right? And also like male-centric sex, right? Focused on my partner's pleasure and not my own. And now like, nope, that's not how we operate.
And you can understand where that came from, right? Those of us who have had these kinds of violations as a child, is we were shown affection and love because of it. And so we learned, oh, that's how we get love and affection. We turn ourselves off and we please them. And again, there's no one there to instruct us any differently. So it's something for us, these threads we have to pull later in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Ooh, yeah, my little girl like wants to keep on going in this, but we're going to pivot a little bit. Well, you've talked about the idea of sex as technology, right? I'd love us to dig into that. You describe kink as a technology of transformation. Can you break it down for us?
So I'm going to talk maybe broader about pleasure, but it includes kink. Okay. So pleasure as a technology, again, if you have the choice between two things and you pick the one that is going to create more pleasure for you, and I don't mean like childish, graspy pleasure, but I mean something that makes you feel more alive. So which one makes you feel more alive? And you're always going down the road of what makes you feel more alive. You will crack open your consciousness, find your dharma. You'll step into your highest timeline. That's what I believe. I believe that pleasure, and for me, so much of my pleasure is wrapped up in kink. They're not synonymous, but they're close to me. I have an overstimulation kink, and it's true. I now have an embarrassment fetish, which came from the shame. I finally figured it out, like in this last year. Once I finally stripped away all the shame, I was still having these moments where I was flushing in embarrassment when somebody, let's say, would point out my arousal, especially if my arousal was something that I wasn't supposed to be having. Like it was a context that wouldn't normally cause arousal, but it did for me, right? So I was still having these flashes of what I was interpreting as shame. But I realized, wait, my body, right? The body as the oracle is not saying this is a shame moment. It's aroused So there's a flash of embarrassment and it's arousing. What was this trauma moment has become this arousing fetishy moment. I didn't know that was a journey that I could go on. And so now I get to offer that as to other people, that those deepest shames can turn into super hot arousal kinks and fetishes.
For fellow like survivors, people who have experienced sexual abuse or relational abuse and who are feeling curious but scared, how do they differentiate between reclaiming power versus reenacting pain?
Such a great question. I would say it's your body as opposed to your mind. Like I just made a post today that said, when my body tells me what it wants or doesn't, I listen. When my mind tells me, I ask my body. If what you are desiring that feels edgy has that spark of turn on in it, that's the reclamation frequency.
I love that.
That's the difference. If it just makes you a little wet, as opposed to, I want to go punish myself, I don't deserve something, and I'm looking for the punishment. And of course, there's also the nuance of people who like to be punished and get the arousal from it. But that's really the point. So like if even in the punishment, if that feels arousing to you, that's the difference. That's the reclamation.
Yeah, well, it's that arousal versus the scared, right? And the where you're shutting off.
Yeah.
Because
Again, like if you go into your body, it'll feel like, if I had to guess at, because everybody's bodies speak to them in different ways, and it's part of our job as the game, the game player, to figure out my body as the console. But I would say that it's a warmth and an outgoing warm energy that radiates out, as opposed to any sort of collapse in the body or a deadening or darkening feeling. So I know those are esoteric words to use, but as people go to like listen to their bodies, and most people in kink tend to be better about that than others, it'll be an outward radiating out, which feeds regenerative feeling of vibration versus something that's pulled inward and dark and collapsing.
yes, I love that. I'm such a visual learner. So like I love those visuals. It definitely feels that way for me. And that's also like what, you mentioned kink is healing. Like I'm a big kink star. Like I love it. And I have found my voice in it, right? I feel like it's really an opportunity to not only just like play with your edges, but also to like really reclaim like your pleasure. Reclaim it, advocate it, have it honored.
Yeah, to be seen in it. That's a healing moment. That's where kink becomes a modality for me. The taboo becomes modality.
And having your yeses and your nos honored. For us recovering people pleasers who are not very comfortable with the no's, to be able to like state your no and have that honored and not shamed, like, is so beautiful, I think.
Even ask for a container where your no is ignored, but because you've negotiated ahead of time, the container itself becomes so safe that you can relinquish what your no means. I know we were talking about safety, and so that is of course like contingent on who you're playing with and the level of trust and that you're willing to surrender to them.
Yes, exactly. Oh, we haven't seen enough. I'm curious. How do surrender and sovereignty coexist, especially for someone exploring submission?
And it goes back to harkening back to really what we were just talking about, which is it is a choice to surrender. The willingness to surrender is where the power is. So the willingness to say, I trust myself enough to negotiate the container, to speak up if I need to within the container. We can talk about a little bit about the dark masculine and the dark feminine. The people pleasing is a distorted dark feminine character trait. And of course, in case it needs to be said, like everybody has masculine and feminine traits within them. They all have light and dark feminine and light and dark masculine. Everybody has all of it. They're just energetic currents that we drop into. It's not a man thing or a woman thing.
Can you give us a little context of what does light and dark feminine and masculine mean?
So light is about harmony and stillness and gentleness and presence, and witness. And then dark is about transformation and movement, direction, and directing it. So like the dark feminine is like my arousal. I can almost see the snake-like energies. I suppose some people will call them kundalini. I have only a little bit of knowledge around that. I can almost see these swirling serpentine infinity symbol piece of energies as my arousal builds. That's the dark feminine. Whether you're female or male, that's your dark feminine energy, which is this almost chaotic swirling energy. And then the dark masculine is the container that can hold that. And he won't
Mm,
let you off the hook. Like if you're bullshitting yourself, he won't let you off the hook. But also he's there to direct the wild current. That's the dark masculine. And so when you put them together, the wildness, because the wildness will just destroy without the container. But if it's
yeah.
just the container without the wildness, nothing happens. So
Mm,
it's when you put them together, kink is such a beautiful vehicle for seeing that play out in real time, those expressions playing out in real time. Something magical happens, transformation happens, and usually for both parties. That wild energy is like Kali energy. It's like it's meant to kind of clear the field of the weeds so that the new growth can burst through and emerge.
that's amazing. Can you give us some examples of how that dark feminine and dark masculine energy show up in people?
In day to day, yeah. Let's see. The simple context in the context of like a kink scene is like pushing someone. I love impact play. When I go into those scenes negotiating, because I want to feel like a fucking gladiator by the end of that scene. And I don't care about blood or not blood, or I used to be really into marks. I don't really care anymore. Again, it's a feeling state that I'm reaching for. And so I negotiate the scene so that they are a master of my body, of my console, in a way that builds me up, that doesn't come in too fast. That would be about them. So they come in slow enough that they build my capacity for sensation. So that by the end of a scene, I
Yes.
feel the most powerful I have ever felt. And then, of course, there's like all of the neurotransmitters and the brain chemistry and everything else that takes place too. But that's a
Yeah.
lingering frequency my body mind has a snapshot of now, that even in the darkest times of my life, I can call back in and say, no, fuck no, I'm powerful as shit.
That's
And
amazing.
and of course you can do those, and you can do that. It's a really dramatic example, I suppose. But we're doing that all the time within us. When we flare because we're seeing something, like we're seeing somebody get bullied, and we flare inside and want to say something, that's our dark feminine. She's coming in, right? The wildness, the chaos, the burner, she's going to burn that shit down. If you've ever like held space for a friend who wants to rage about something, you're in your dark masculine. You're holding the container while she goes fucking wild. And you're like, I've got you. And guess what? You both feel better. You feel like you helped her. That feels like value to you, and she was helped in the witnessing of that wildness. Forbidden Alchemy has a lot of post-chapter exercises. You get a taste of this. In fact, they're like journaling prompts where you journal from both aspects of yourself. And the dark feminine talks about what she wants that she maybe has never said out loud before, and then your inner dark masculine responds and says, "Well, here's how I can help hold that container. Here's what I can do." There are exercises where you can get to know your dark masculine and dark feminine aspects. And then there are spicy add-ons too. And so there's some very tame exercises, and then there are these spicy or spicier add-ons that start to like really ramp up the excitement and the edge.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of like a little spiciness or one type of
Maybe
prompt?
I'm thinking of the primal. The chapter that's popping to mind as you ask is the primal play chapter. It steps you through the incremental loosening of you in control and giving over to more of your animal instincts, and then negotiating. And then the spicier add-on would be like how to negotiate that. And there are things that you put a smaller time limit on it so that you're only allowing the unleashing to happen within, again, like a container that feels safe. And then you can keep pushing. You can either go for a longer time, or you can do something that's more intense. Maybe it starts off with they wrap a restraint, or they wrap a blanket around you, or they put their body weight on you. And then where does it go from there? Again, the spicier add-ons would say, well, you let the natural animal to take its course, scratch, bite. I'm trying to introduce it to both newcomers who are curious and brave, but also enough that the people with more experience recognize themselves and then can take those spicier add-ons even to deeper, bigger extremes.
I love that you have kind of these increments too. Going back to that safety, I think oftentimes that's the holdback of kink is like, how do I explore? Where do I start? Somebody asked me like recently, how do you even get to that? What I'm hearing in Forbidden Alchemy, it's like really that permission slip, and also a guide to show you how to dabble, tap into that erotic pleasure play.
Yeah, in fact, my experiences, of course, like everyone else's, range from mild to extreme. But I've included more of my extreme experiences, and that was by design, because I'll go back to like, I wanted to explore anal play with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that I knew I liked way back when I was pregnant. I wanted to play. And so I approached this one partner about anal play. So I was like, hey, I was like super shy about it. What do you think if we maybe explore this thing? And then I didn't even know, like, it was like a fetish for him. He was like, oh my God, he was so enthusiastic about this anal sandbox now that we were creating between us that I suddenly
Waiting
felt.
for someone to ask that
Oh
question.
my God, I guess. And I was waiting for somebody to have exactly that reaction because where I was just ready to take like that one little step forward, he gave me a swimming pool, an Olympic-sized swimming pool to swim in around it. And so that's the effort with Forbidden Alchemy. I'm giving you a lot of my more extreme experiences so that the sandbox is bigger for you to play in, so that even you can take one step forward or you can take 12 steps forward. And that's the permission. You can get to play anywhere in between. Bigger sandbox, bigger swimming pool.
I'm curious too to know, like, when going back to the spiritual, the divine, do you have any experiences that you can think of or share where you have felt spiritual and divine, whether it's with kink, submission, along those lines?
I think probably power dynamics have felt the most spiritual because worship and submission for me has always been an extremely reverent role to embody. I know you were going to also ask me about a scene or a kink moment that was actually healing. And so I have an example that kind of covers both.
We love that.
And
Two for one.
And again, it just shows you the organic way that the two are the same, healing and spirituality. And it was the first time that I was in submission. I had met a dominant. We had gotten to know each other over a period of time. And then it was the first time that he invited me to, is this private group that I got invited to way early on in my very early kink journey. And so he invited me to this party and invited me to be in submission. And so I didn't know much about what that meant. So we got there, we negotiated. In the process of that, he was a well-known rigger and sadist, which was exciting to me. And he was really the core of that private community too. So it was a big deal to be playing with him in this way. Everybody knew I was new. In our negotiation, he did what feels like a very stereotypical guy thing, which was like, if you think you're going to orgasm, you need to ask my permission. Of course, I'm like super early new. So I'm like, whatever, dude. Whatever with your ego. And you're like, you have to have control over my orgasm. And especially because at that time, my orgasm was hard to get to. It took a lot of work. It was like a fucking math problem that I was solving. It was laughable to me that I was saying yes, because to me, it was not a thing. It's not a possibility. So during the course of the night, not only did I thought I could orgasm once and I was too afraid to ask because the shame layer was too thick for me at the time, but the second time I actually did ask and he told me no. And by the way, neither of those buildups had anything to do with genital touch. So that was the big awakening. That was both the healing and the spiritual moment for me, because I realized, holy shit, I could have come just from this container and him controlling me and me getting to rest in the safety of the container. And then that unlocked my body. And there was like some sort of disconnect between my mind and my body. It was huge and profound for me to experience that. So amazing. And there are many more stories. That's the first one that really struck me.
I'm very curious because you mentioned, like, for this instance, your orgasm was hard to find. You would only have one. For our female listeners, I resonate with that. I no longer resonate with it, right? Because I have, through exploring my own eroticism, now I can go for like 15 minutes. Ask my neighbors. They hear it.
Yep.
I actually have to stop myself because I'm like, okay.
Or collapse. Or you could just collapse on exhaustion. That's a fun way.
So what was that journey like for you?
It's layered. So I was at a swinger weekend. This was my husband and I walked into like a group of swingers that were all kind of family. So we weren't really part of the broader sweeter community, but we were invited into this family. We were at a weekend with them. This other husband had arranged with my husband that when I arrived, that he was going to make me drop all my bags and he was going to whisk me downstairs and we were going to play. And I didn't know anything about it. So I arrive, we get there. Everybody's like, drop your bags. And I'm like, what? And I like look at my husband. He's got like this Cheshire cat grin. I'm like, okay, this is pretty hot. So I'm swept downstairs where there's this beautiful bed and a fireplace, and it's in Big Bear and it's beautiful. And it's almost snowing outside. So it's like ideal circumstances, like everything I could want, right? And we start to play. I'm not fully registering what's happening in my mind and body. I just know like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And this guy's I have a super big crush on this particular husband. And like, how much more could I be asking for here? But he must have sensed something in me, because he leaned down. We were like missionary, and he leaned down in my ear, said, whatever it is you're holding on to, whatever it is you're afraid of, you can let that go. You're safe. I started to cry. I'm like, what the? Now I'm crying. Now I'm like, fuck, I'm ruining this moment. It was so beautiful, and only kinky people will understand this. He did not stop fucking me when I started crying. So important. I did not know about that at that time. He did not stop fucking me. And he fucked me through the cry. Once we'd finished, we sat up and we started talking. And he explained to me that, when my clothes were on, I was very provocative and sexy. Come hither. Yeah. And then when my clothes came off, something happened. I shut down and I became closed. And he was right. And I hated the idea that it was true. I wanted all of this stuff, but there was I didn't know that the connection between my mind and my body and those experiences as a child were holding me back from that full yes. So that sent me on a journey, and it started with seeing a sexologist. This is when sexology was a brand new term. And so I saw a sexologist, and I remember her, I filled out the exam, and she was like putting on the gloves and doing the oil, and she was going to check my genitals and check for childbirth damage and all of that. And I remember her putting the lube on and saying, if you get aroused, that's okay. And I started crying again. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? So I'm tracing back to the moment of I cried when he said that. I'm crying now. I started to shut it all down, and I realized this is an opportunity. Like, I don't know what's underneath this. And I kind of opened to it, and all of the fear, all of the shame, all of the fear came up. It was almost like a Rolodex of images of like, I suddenly just understood how when my body became aroused, it shut down because of that link back to my childhood. So it started with her because between the childbirth damage, which is totally real and we don't talk about enough, creates nerve ending damage. And so it started with literally like remediating the scar tissue from childbirth. And because there was like a set of, I don't even know what to call it, but like cartilage and muscles and tissue that had like contracted and become like a tangled web that needed to be softened. So castor oil, massage every day. My husband would get in there, insert his fingers and like stretch the material. Literally so it started with just literally physically returning circulation to the area. Then it was also, of course, at the same time, like stripping away the childhood shame, becoming more in touch with my energy body. It kind of was like, just continue to say yes to whatever is pleasurable to you. That was, that if I have to look at it in a broad way, I suppose that's what it looked like. But there are physical things that people should know about getting circulation back into those areas, including when I went to do the anal sex too. Like I was using a Hitachi in just the general area of my anus to, again, open up the tissue there and return the blood flow. And castor oil treatments are really huge. If you haven't, I have like a little document of instructing people on how to do castor oil packs and stuff to help draw out the toxins and the scar tissue.
Is that accessible on your website?
No, but I'm happy to hand deliver it to you. I also want to say that because of my background of childhood sexual abuse and incest, my orgasm was linked to fantasy. I couldn't orgasm through just physical stimulation. I also spent same period of time. I would self-pleasure right up to orgasm. I'd use the fantasy because I didn't know how else to do it at that time. So I'd fantasy up to right to the moment of climax. And then I would shut the fantasy down and I would focus right into the body. So when I talk about going into the body, becoming more in touch with the body. So I shut the fantasy down and I went right to the physical sensation, and then I would climax. Over time, I incrementally changed the time in which I shut the fantasy down so that the fantasy shut down earlier and earlier and earlier in the pleasure experience, and I could just focus more on the physical sensation. And over time, I completely was able to unlink fantasy from orgasm. Now I can choose it or not choose it. It's no longer a need, which is also what Forbidden Alchemy is about. It's about going from need, fear, the trauma, to going to choice and desire. Where you're not chasing anymore. You're just choosing.
Not chasing and choosing. So fucking powerful. And that example, I mean, you took us on a journey. And I love that too, because it is a journey, right? It's not one moment, one instance. You really displayed how you came into that internal healing, also being able to be held, given permission in a safe container to explore, to allow yourself to release.
While later having people push my pleasure. Oh, that's too much. Like when you first discovered the G-spot, it can feel really intense. And then people not letting me, like that's the dark masculine, not letting me off the hook. I'm going to hold you here because you can take it. And let's see what happens on the other side of that.
God, so good. And I love too that your husband, helped with this whole scene. People what are some like scripts or communication pieces that people can use to help their partners also like help them explore their fantasies?
Yeah, this is not a simple question to answer because, of
Mhm.
course, it depends on your own set of past experiences, which may or may not include trauma,
Absolutely.
your dynamic with the person that you're in a relationship with. But what I have found over time is that when you approach somebody with excitement and enthusiasm, that they reflect that back to you while still saying, I'm also nervous. So my simple approach would probably be to say, I'm so excited to share something with you that I've been holding on to. And I'm equally as scared that you're going to receive it and judge me for it. Be really open about the fear of being judged, but
Yeah.
also the truth of the excitement that there's this thing you've been fantasizing about that just lights your whole body up. Like, who's not going to respond to that? And then, of course, if they can't meet you there, that's like, in my case, my husband and I were also ethically non-monogamous. And so if I couldn't meet him or he couldn't meet me, then we were, of course, free to go find a person to go engage with in that way.
Absolutely. Huge. Oh my God. I want to keep on going. I feel like Sharon Marie, you have done an amazing job of taking us on this journey. If you are not convinced to go and get Forbidden Alchemy right now,
Let me give you the
rewind.
full title, by the way, because there are other
Oh, okay.
Forbidden Alchemies. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Forbidden Alchemy, Transmuting Taboo into Erotic Medicine. That's the full title.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. Huge. We'll definitely have a link in the show notes with where people can get Forbidden Alchemy. And before we end, I always love to come to completion because, we love a little coming to completion moment, aka rapid fire round. Okay, so question 1, a desire you used to be scared of, but now feels like power.
Yeah, my hunger for more and hunger in general. Hunger.
Yummy. The dark feminine or the dark masculine, what energy are you living in today?
They literally, I flow between them, right? Like I can have a thought of an arousing thought, and that's her. And then I can decide not to share it out loud. That's him. I
I love
literally
that.
move between them.
That's amazing. One taboo that you think is actually sacred.
I love this question. The taboo itself is not sacred. It's your relationship to your taboo that is sacred. How are you
Damn.
showing up for your taboo? That's what's sacred. The knowing of the self, or the endeavor to know the self.
Damn, I love that. Something you wish more women would stop apologizing for.
Their thirst for sensation and ecstasy.
Yes, give it to us. I'm a big sensation whore. Give it to
Orgasmic
me.
meals are a thing.
Ooh, I love that term, orgasmic meals. A kink that always surprises people when they realize how healing it can be.
Again, I think that anything that feels taboo to them is where the healing is on the healing is on the other side of that. So I wouldn't say that there's a particular kink that does that, because again, what feels kinky to someone is so subjective.
Absolutely. All right, so tell us a sentence that instantly turns you on energetically or erotically.
Well, I admit from the right person, baby girl is very arousing to me.
Okay.
And the other one would be, I can smell your arousal, something like that. Because I know I can smell it,
Ooh,
I don't
talk
mind
about sensations.
That's definitely part of my primal.
That's amazing. One thing people get wrong about submissive women.
Submissives need to be women, and that submissives are masochists as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Dominants are not sadists. They're completely different categories. Submissives are not masochists. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what is your favorite simple ritual to reconnect with your body?
I would say it starts with goosebumps. Literally, I might touch my hair, my scalp, because that will give me like whole body shivers. And then that will shake me out of whatever the moment is. But in general, tuning into the sensations, right? It could start with sound if physical is not available to me because my nervous system is doing something funny. So it could start with closing your eyes and starting with sound, or you can like go through the different senses, make saliva in your mouth and swallow, listen for some stuff, look for beauty, touch your body, even grabbing the body or running your fingers for goosebumps. But again, literally like anything that brings you back into the body.
That presence, so huge. All right, 2 more questions. A book or teacher who shaped your erotic or spiritual path?
Wow. I totally saw this question and I'm feeling stumped. I would say Jaya is probably one that comes to mind. She is the one who invented the erotic blueprints, and she's featured in that limited series called Sex, Love, and Goop. So maybe her, because the ability to kind of declare out loud, or used to be a shapeshifter. And in the kink community, that used to be like such rigid roles. You weren't allowed to kind of move between roles. So Jaya with the shapeshifter kind of allowed me to finally free myself up, to own all of that instead of having to compartmentalize myself.
Yes. Final question. What edge are you exploring right now?
Visibility, being an erotic mystic in a world, in a conservative and puritanical society, is an edge for me. I'll say this too, us knowing our pleasure and us knowing how to fulfill our pleasure, it makes us less governable by systems that rule from fear and control. And so I believe that forbidden alchemy is a piece of spiritual activism, and knowing your body and knowing your pleasure and stepping into your pleasure and letting no one take your desire and your pleasure from you, I believe is a way to speak against what we're seeing today politically.
Yes. Boom. What a fucking powerful way to end this beautiful conversation. Before we go, where can people find you?
Yeah, my website, SharonMarieScott.com. I'm also on Substack, Sharon Marie Scott. Or if you go on all of those platforms, but you're looking for my name or looking for Life Turned On, Sharon Life Turned On.
We'll definitely include those in the show links. Thank you so much, Sharon Marie. For our listeners, we want to hear what kink or edge you're going to try next. As always, remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get ate. Thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again. That's all for today, lover. Remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get ate. If you liked this episode, share with a friend, like, subscribe, and as always, thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again.